grief for lots of different people can look lots of different ways, right? It can be
Yeah.
a person that has passed. It could be a heartbreak. It could be so many different ways, right? Like this experience of loss comes with love, and like,
Mhm.
what does it mean to like experience loss and love together, right? Like grief and love are like one and the same. You can't have one without the other. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just keep it steady on the magic. Do my thing, I'm healing, it's fantastic. If I fall, rise automatic. You ain't no now, you know. I'm the one raise myself like a tree from the roots. West side girl, cause she lit in the coast. East side girl when she speaks to the roots. Stay 100 cause she on with the truth. Been down struggle, know that it pass. Only going up, yeah, the pain don't last. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. This is take off, take off, take off. Shorty like Brandy, fight like Monica. What you know about her? Baby girl rising, way to the top. Shaking the world, don't expect her to stop. Purpose so great, she get what she got. Follow her step, cause she following God. What you need more, got a heart full of gold. Even at times when it's raining and cold. Ooh, she bout take off. Ooh, she bout.
What up, what up, what up, y'all? It's your girl, Hanna, but you are part of the fam, so go ahead and call me Rutha. Y'all, you are in for a treat. It is Uproot Your Thoughts on the Uprooted Network today. Y'all, you already know what this segment is about. Hopefully, by now, you were a couple episodes in, but if not, let me remind you, this is the segment for us to really focus on, where our lives are currently and where we want to go. And in order for us to get to where we want to go, we got to uproot some things. We got to uproot some bad habits. We got to uproot some trauma. We got to uproot limiting beliefs. There's just so much. So, in this segment, it's really an opportunity for me to bring on amazing, dope people, have some really cool conversations, and let's actually do the work, right? This is what we call the work. If you are on your journey of healing, on personal development, then this is what you need. Okay, this is where we get to spend that time really dedicating to advancing and figuring out, like, how do we do this thing called life, like adulting? What is that? So without further ado, I have a dope, beautiful guest with me today. I'm trying to remember how we met. Actually, I should have like went over that before, but I know for sure it's on Instagram, for sure, for sure. And then also again in person, when we were in Denver, and just super insightful. Like every conversation is super insightful, like very intentional, and I thought that she'd be perfect to bring on the show. So without further ado, I want to introduce to y'all my girl Selamawit. Yo, yo, what's up?
Hey, thank you for
Well,
having me.
yes, yo. I really had to remember. I was like, wait, when did we meet first? Was it IG? Was it Clubhouse? Like I was like,
Rose.
I can't, one of those spaces. But if y'all want to follow her, go ahead and follow her on IG. It is at the bottom of the screen. But yeah, I remember I was like, I don't remember the platform, but I remember like one of the early conversations that I was in with you. I was like, oh, I like the way she talks. Like I was like, yes, this is good. This is good stuff. And it was like, let me continue that. Like I love people who can really articulate a thought, or like will actually go deeper into it. And so I really appreciate that in you. And when it came to this segment, I was like, oh, she'd be perfect for this. So that's why I brought you on, sis.
Wow. Yeah, thank you again. I really do appreciate the space that you create and how deep you go into just sharing of yourself and also allowing platforms and spaces for others to share of themselves, because we all know that we're tied together in so many ways. So just being able to amplify voices and perspectives and lived experiences is so important. So thank you for creating this space always. You've been doing this for a minute. So
Right. I'll be like, oh my God, it's been 3 years. It's so crazy.
yeah.
I'm like, wow, like I'm really in this now. I'm like committed, committed. So yes, thank you. And just for, so the people can get to know you a little bit more, tell them a little bit about your background, maybe where you're coming from. Let people know.
Yeah, so I'm Selamawit. I also go by Selam. I am a daughter of immigrants, of course, the eldest of 5 children. And I, yeah, really live into that like eldest daughter experience. That's a big part of how I've been able to navigate my life in the world. Of course, like many of us probably here watching, I am currently based in Denver, Colorado, and I'm from Atlanta. So I grew up, born and raised in the South in Atlanta. My whole family's there. Um, and a lot of like my socialization and like learning about sort of like who I am, what are the things that have shaped me and what are the things that like continue to shape me, I think have been like across both of these places. Kind of like that foundational experience in Georgia and Atlanta, being the daughter of immigrants and the oldest child. And then, of course, like in Denver, when it comes to like what does it truly mean to grow into like yourself and explore and like have the space for solitude and depth and what does that look like? So I call both of these like home in different ways. Um, but that's like my background. But a lot of the work that I do that is like connected to a lot of like how I show up in the world is really rooted in justice and social justice, and particularly around education equity. So I do a lot of work in the education space around like what does it mean to have access to the world, and like how do you participate in the world, and what does that mean in a way that young people and folks can feel affirmed in that. So my whole career has been in educational equity, and really across those lines of social innovation and policy, and lots of different kinds of like design within that space.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So people are like, "Ooh, big words." I'm like, "Listen, she tries to make the world a better place." Like,
Oh,
when I try to say,
yes,
like, yes, it's hard because like when we think about like what we do, right? It's like, no, we're trying to make more space. We're trying to make it so that people can actually like fully live in in their greatness, right? Like live in their authenticity, like live in and be able to actually go after the things that they want, right? Like there's so many obstacles and like limitations like put on us, especially in the education sector. So
yeah,
like you coming in and trying to make that space more equitable, like try to make that space like actually function the way it's supposed to, right? Like actually educate us, actually get us to that next level is very commendable work. So I be trying to like, just let people she's trying to fix the world, y'all. She's trying to clean it up.
my gosh.
And that is really it's a big job.
Yeah, it's like a lot of trying to pass it forward. And of course, like, I'm still in it too, right? Like, I do consider myself to be a lifelong learner. I think we all are in many different kinds of ways. And so, like, what does it mean to participate in a society and a community in ways that feel empowering, in ways that feel like there is some agency in that, in a way where you can feel held by the system around you? And what does that look like? And so, of course, like a lot of this is influenced by my experiences growing up, like my dad just definitely valued just the way that what it meant to be able to participate in this new like life, right? That our my parents, us, like our the children that they had access to in this new land. um in the 90s, like me and my siblings were born in the 90s and the early 2000s. So it's like, what does it mean to sort of participate in this new society, and like really valued what it meant to learn and to like be in a space where education could happen. And so I'm definitely influenced by yeah, like that big push that my parents did, because I saw
Yeah.
how like just access to opportunity, access to more than that, right? It's mentors, it's like people in your life who are really rooting for you, it's people who are really creating these wraparound supports, and for you to be able to explore in depth who you are, and who, more of yourself. And so indebted
Yeah.
to my parents, and like all, like many of us, my story is not, separate or dissimilar from a lot of folks in this community. But I
Mhm.
do want to like shout out the parents when it comes to education, because I know that
Yeah.
that's a big push that they put on us.
Yes, and they'll love that. They'll love that because it is true. I'm like, yeah, I'm a nerd because my parents made me read a lot of books. Like it was very much like an important thing, especially when you consider like for most immigrants, they're their journeys here were usually tumultuous, right? And so their education oftentimes is interrupted. So they're very adamant that that doesn't happen for their kids, right? So I definitely feel that, and I see it every man growing up in the Bay. I was like, oh, you're an immigrant too? Oh, your parents? Okay, got it. Like we all kind of just had that same understanding that our parents were always driving that in us, like, I came to this land to give you a better opportunity, XYZ, and then making sure that they try to open as many doors as they could for us, even if they didn't quite understand it. They were always like, my daughter needs the best, like whatever that is, right? My dad was
Yeah.
very adamant of like, I didn't leave the hood to go back to the hood because we landed in Oakland in 93. So yeah, he was like,
Mhm.
this ain't it. Like he was like, this ain't it. And like started pushing us further and further out of Oakland until we ended in San Jose. But that
Mhm.
was one of his biggest things, was that we were in a system that he felt like would actually be conducive to our growth, and like that we weren't bogged down by like all the other drama and problems of this, the town or whatever. So I
Mhm.
definitely can resonate with that. It's also like I was getting a little chills because it's like my dad is currently reliving that
Mm.
with my
Mhm.
my half siblings, who I don't really call half siblings, but just for context for other people, um, they're younger, right? They're like, my little sister just turned 13 yesterday, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like you were
Yeah.
a teenager now. This is crazy. But that time period, especially with COVID, and then with the
Mhm.
ongoing crisis and war in Ethiopia, like they were out of school, so that was
Right.
like very traumatizing. And then like just now getting schools back up and functioning, right? So it is very much an important topic for us. And
Mhm.
kind of on that note of like, all of that work is really heavy, and kind of what we were just like, what I was just sharing is also very heavy for us. So
Mhm.
everyone knows I don't just speak mental health, I practice it, I live it, I share with y'all very vulnerably all the time, like Jesus. Like I'm like, sometimes I'm like, y'all don't need to see me cry all the time. But what I will say in all sharing all that is that I do want to like make sure that we're practicing checking in with each other. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to check in with my sis and ask you, like, in one word or one sentence, like, how is your heart? How are you feeling? With all of the things that you're talking about, your family obligations, right? I'm also the oldest of five. I didn't think I knew that about you before. And I'm like, hey, me too. So
Yeah.
big families, right? So it's like it's a lot to carry, and I think that you carry it well. I know like that most people probably wouldn't assume, right? And that's what they do to me all the time. So I make it a habit to ask people like, but how are you? How's your heart?
Mhm. I love that. Thank you. I love the question. I love the centering. I love the like bringing it back, right? Because yeah, I can get really heady. Like we were sitting here and I was like, yeah, and like every child and every person should be able to do that and that. Like it turned into this like, the personal is very political, right? And so you start
Yeah.
kind of like digging into that sort of space. But yeah,
Yeah.
I feel good. I feel open. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you today. Like it's been a minute since I've seen you. Um,
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm going home in 2 weeks. My little brother is graduating high school, so that's going to be like just really exciting to, it's your little sibling, your little brother, and you're like, whoa, this is such a milestone. And so it's going to be fun to be back and just to, to be home with my family and to, love on him and like celebrate. So I'm excited for that. Yeah, I'm feeling open. My heart is open. I feel expansive. Like, I just feel like I feel good. I'm in a really nice place. If you asked me at the beginning of the week, I would have been like, "Whoa, what's happening? Like, I need some space." Like, I don't know, but I think it's just like right now I feel great. And I think part of it is just like, of course, like being here talking to you and just like
Aw.
the warmth that I feel like just even in these few moments that we've been together. But I feel good. What about you? How are you? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
How's your heart?
That's very sweet. Thank you for that. And congrats for your brother. That's really exciting.
Ah,
I'm like,
go
oh,
Mickey.
we love graduation. Yes, that's super
Nikki.
right? Like, I always am like, especially right now, like people graduating, I'm like, yo, you did that through a pandemic, like through multiple, because it's not just like Ethiopia that's at war, like there's multiple wars happening, right? Like through all of the chaos that they're still able to like accomplish a goal. I'm just like super impressed. So always gotta send flowers that way. I'm gonna say like, okay, if I had a word, okay, maybe a sentence. I think that I feel very confident in my flow right now. And that's like a really nice place for me to be in, because the last like I feel like I've been, like those memes and like all these sayings that leaders say, like if you focus on yourself for 6 months, imagine where you could be. Well, I
Mhm.
finally did that. So I'm like, oh, this is what they're talking about. This is nice. I was like, I
Yeah.
like this. It's been really, really very good for me to like reprioritize myself and pay attention to all those areas that I've been neglecting. And I'm like, oh, all right, I like this. I like where we're at. Feeling very like just at peace with that. Like I know where I'm at currently, I know where I'm going, and
Mhm.
I know that I have like the support and the tools and like in myself alone, let alone like actually like reaching out and getting that from my network to really like build in my dream, and like other people believe in it and champion it for me. Like I have, it's Mother's Day this weekend. Like when they see it, it will be past, but it's really nice, and I'm just kind of really feeling like grateful. Like if I had a word for my season, it would be grateful.
Mhm.
And how I'm feeling and all of that is just like finally confident and like this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm like committed to. Like my purpose is very clear. My vision is very clear. And
Mhm.
now it's just about taking the steps to get there. And I think it's a nice space to be at, I really like it. Thank you for I was like, yeah, do people ask me back? I'm like, I don't know. But thank you for for flipping it on me. But yeah, it's a good spot to be in. And it kind of lends us into what we wanted to talk about today anyways, right? Which is our personal identity and like self-exploration of like how do we even get to these answers, because these are phenomenal, right? Like for us to feel good it's like
Yeah.
yes. Like
No, it took
oh
some
my
work.
god, a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh, like every day. That's like when people say that I'm like every day. I put that disclaimer every day. Like it doesn't stop. Like if you're alive, there's still things to do. And so like your work doesn't ever finish. And I know that people feel like, oh my God, that's like horrible. It's like a never ending to-do list. And it's like, no, it's more of like every day you have an opportunity to learn and to grow and to like try something different if you want. Right. So like it's that whole glass half full or half empty kind of concept. And it's like, yeah, but like regardless, the glass is still there. It's up to you. Right.
Right.
Like it's up to you. Do you want to fill it or you don't? Right. So that's kind of how I see it. But I was like, oh, I want to know for you, like, let's start maybe with kind of
Mm.
just defining what those things mean for you. Like,
Mhm.
I personally think you need to do self-exploration so that you can actually figure out what your personal identity is.
Mhm.
I'm wondering how your mind wrapped around that.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Yeah, that is like an incredible space to dig into for sure, especially at a time like this, and this like, the midst of the seasons changing, like,
Mhm.
in the spring, it can call for like things to be sprung. So this is like
Yes.
one of them, right? It's like this sense of like, okay, like what is happening? What does self-exploration look like? And like what does it look like right now? And what are the
Mhm.
things that can help like animate that and have animated that throughout time? And so I mean, the first thing I think about, of course, is like how do we use like solitude, space, and time as our friends? Like
Mhm.
having space, like to be yourself, right? And to kind of nurture like what it means to be you in different ways, whether that's like spending time with yourself, whether it's, journaling, creating these daily rituals, that's something that I feel like I needed to really dig into. I have the Channing Nicholas Astro Planner, which has been super duper helpful. There's like a little piece where I can write about what I dreamt the night before. I have
Oh.
a space where I can like write my intention for the day. And then there's just like this open other space where I can sort of jot down any thoughts, ideas, dreams, or whatever I have like that are reflecting of that day. But I think for me, like having that space to journal or plan, not in this like, productivity kind of way, but more so in this like, where am I right now and how am I taking
Mm.
stock and taking this snapshot of like what is happening with me at this moment. So for me, like that is what comes up when I think about self exploration is creating the space, creating the habits to be able to dig in those
Mhm.
ways and to also be super curious about what's coming up for me, like what does it mean for me to be feeling this way now? Am I aware of it? How do I draw awareness to myself and, what's happening? Is there something that's like super irking me? Is there something that makes me feel super expansive? Like, what are those things? What are those moments? And how am I just like continuously being curious around what's happening inside of my body? Because I think for so much of my life, and I think for a lot of, it's probably get shared experience with a lot of different kinds of people, is that
Mhm.
there's always like this sense of, what does it mean to be you and how do you know that and how do you like build that courage, right? Around being in a space where you can explore yourself because, it doesn't, society or communities don't really lend itself to that. So in addition to those things, of course, like there's, one of the biggest things, part of exploration and self exploration for me is also like, what does it mean to be part of something larger
Mm.
than me, right? Like, how are you situated and how am I situated in my community? What does community mean? Like, how am I being held? How am I allowing myself to be seen? I have to see myself first, but I also have to allow others to see me, not
Mhm.
just physically, of course, but like emotionally, like spiritually. Like, what does it mean to really engage in this, like being of a person, being of a being alongside others in a way where all of that can be witnessed, mirrored, reflected in these really beautiful ways where like I feel like the more that I share and the more that I'm like with my people, right?
Yeah.
Like the more I understand who I am. Um, and then I think that takes me to like this idea of self personal identity, which for me is like sometimes it can feel super elusive where I'm like, huh, what? Like I don't know what
Mhm.
this means. I feel like my identity changes like depending on the spaces that I'm in, right? Like, of course, there are these political identities. What does it
Yeah.
mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be Tigrayan American? Like, what does all of these things mean? And
Yeah.
also, like, when? Like, when do these identities, in terms of like those markers, come in? But then, you also have like, who are you in your family? Who are you to your people? Who are you to this place that you're
Mhm.
in as well? And then who are you to yourself, right? Like so many different identities that I try not to like hang on to them. But I
Yeah.
do think that personal identity and being able to sort of like flow into them, through them, recognize like some of that stuff is like projected while also like having some really, really, really critical, like, political implications, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not just
Mhm.
like, hey, identity doesn't exist. No, it certainly does exist in many ways. And also,
Yeah.
like, what does it mean to situate yourself within it and to also navigate your life in a way that, you can feel more free too, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I love that question because it just like took me everywhere.
Yeah, but that's really what it is, right? And I think that, like, a lot of people, because it is such a big thing, a lot of people get, like, stuck or they get scared or they get nervous because they're like, "Oh my god," like, it feels like we're trying to get them to fit into a box, and it's like, "No, no, no, I want you to, like, bust the box open and figure out, like there was some language in there you're talking about, like, you're seeing yourself within your community, you're seeing yourself within your friends, you're seeing yourself there, but you're also like needing to see who you are too, just for you. And it's like, no, like you got to do all of that. You got to have that exploration because we don't come out with that. Like we come out, like I think about looking at like my baby cousins, right? And I'm just like, they're exploring. He's trying to figure out what the world is. He came out and it was like, "Oh, what the heck is going on out here?" Like, you were in a belly, you were safe, and then it's like you're like learning your environment. You're learning all of those things, and as we're growing up, we're also taking in information of like who we're supposed to be or how we're supposed to show up. And you kind of alluded to that too, right? Like in our communities, there's kind of an expectation. So like I guess where I kind of would even dive a little deeper with you is, where did that shift in mindset come for you? Because this isn't something that is common in our community. Like I feel like even this conversation, even this idea of self-exploration, I don't, at least for me in my experience, it wasn't something that was encouraged, right? It wasn't something that like I had a lot of mentorship from within my community. It was something that I had to learn kind of at school or through, honestly, through Oprah, because I was watching Oprah all the time. Like, you know, like there was books and there was other things that I was doing to even start to get to a practice, right? Like I was like, oh, that planner sounds dope, right? Like to even get into a practice of like being able to ask yourself these questions and be okay with the exploration of figuring it out. Because there's also this like
Mhm.
extreme pressure of like, this is what you're supposed to be and this is how you're supposed to function. And we're
Mhm.
like, we're breaking through that, right? Like, we're like, nah, because that's not something like when you go, like, at least for me, when I go and ask people in our community, especially the elders in our community, that's not the story they're going to give you. Like, I think
Mhm.
most of them are still trying to figure out who they are, to be honest. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that question.
yes.
Okay. Yes. Whew. Well, I think that's a really important question because I think it really gets to the heart of like transformation or what, all these different words that get at it. But for me,
Mhm,
like my dad passed away in 2014, and that was a moment where you know that was a moment where I think like everything just kind of like busted open. Where when you're
mhm.
like grieving like really deeply
Yeah,
and you kind of don't know what's happening, you kind of feel like you're drowning in some ways. Community is what like supports right?
mhm,
And so being with people, like being in a space where I had to like completely, it felt like everything was just like all of my self conception, like conception of myself, conception of like the world around me, like while also
mhm.
having to like, I was like starting a new like role. That was like the first year I was teaching and all of that things. Like it was just a big old time where there was a lot of change and there was a lot of grief. And so I turned to authors and poets that wrote a
Mm,
lot about grief and really like could kind of like take you and hold your hand and also like give you a push, right? To like really
yeah.
not avoid what you were feeling, but to really dig into it. And so one of
Mhm.
the poets for me that has like changed my life, Naira Wahid, Salt, like that is the book that
Mm,
one of my friend, yeah, she introduced it to me. She, oh man, like Naira Wahid's work has, it's so incredible when it comes to like how do you be in your body and how do you like really go into yourself and deal with all of that. And so
yeah.
I think from there, like that moment of like having to deal and like not deal, but like having to really experience yourself in this moment of grief and deep emotional pain and to,
Mhm.
to like go through those stages as well, to acceptance, like it becomes a cycle, right? And I know that grief for lots of different people can look lots of different ways, right? It can be
Yeah.
a person that has passed, it could be a heartbreak, it could be so many different ways, right? Like this experience of loss comes with love and like
Mhm.
what does it mean to like experience loss and love together, right? Like grief and love are like one and the same. You can't have one without the other. And so
Yeah.
those are the moments, right? Like when I think about if I grieve around like maybe a sense of, there's a part of myself that I'm missing, even, right? Like I think it kind of expands to mean what does it mean to show up for myself? What does it mean to show up and, alongside my community? And like what tools can I call on? Because it just, everything changes in you. At least that's what happens in me, where I'm just like, I have to figure this out because if I don't,
Yeah.
I am not going to be okay. And I really want to be okay. And so I think, this is a very vulnerable question, but I think it's important because I think a lot of us are feeling that in many kind of ways. And I think we've all experienced like emotions like that. We've all experienced deep love. Hopefully we've all, certainly have all experienced grief. And like what does it mean to work through that and to be present to it and to bring awareness to it.
Mhm, mhm. Wow. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Um, Definitely, yeah. I'm learning lots about you today. I'm like, did not know those things, and my heart is like with you because that. So I've played the support role in that, in the sense of my moving to Colorado was to like support my uncle and my cousin after his wife passed, unfortunately. And I said his wife, my aunt. And it is that. It's like the visual that I get, because I see everything, was literally like the rug being pulled from under you, and then you kind of like look up and you're like, the world changed. You're like, wait a minute, this isn't my house. Like, this isn't like, where am I? Like, this is not, it's like an alternate reality than the one that you've known, your whole life. And it's like, well, how do I operate in this new reality? Because this new reality is not one that I planned for. Right. So it's like, it completely, and you don't even notice it. It's like it's so big, and then it's like, wait a minute. Oh, there's a reminder. Wait, I forgot that is now different. Like, okay, like I can't rely on that. So it does force you to kind of adapt and like decide really, like, who do you want to be? How do you want to be? And how can you navigate this? Because the way that you planned on it is not an option anymore. It's like, well, what do I do now? Like, what are my options now? Like, what can I do? And yeah, I hear that, like, and I was like having flashbacks of moments. And even a few weeks ago, I was with my sorority sister that is going through that now, right? And
Mm-hmm.
is and that's the conversations we were having in terms of, well, what is my purpose? Like, I don't really feel fulfilled, right? And like, what am I doing any of this for? And what, just like, who am I now? Like, it does make you kind of reassess and like realign what's important to you and like what has value to you, because it forces you to like think about it. And it was, yeah, I feel you. I do think there's so much earth shattering kind of like
Mm-hmm.
moments that we have that really like force us down this path. And you're right, everybody just experienced it. Like, we all went through COVID together. Like,
Right. Yeah.
everybody just had that experience. So if you never had an experience like that before, I feel like those are the people who are struggling the most with it, because they haven't had to transition yet. They haven't had their world like upended in any significant way. And so my heart bleeds for them too, because like, you're really, really not prepared to deal with this. And we're like, in different ways we weren't either, but now like that things continuously happen, it's like we have a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of kind of a roadmap of maybe how we would approach the problem, not that we always have the solution. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I like to think about um my exploration and my healing work, to really understand who I am. Because it was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
who am I now? Like, and it was like, have I changed? Who was I before? Like, that, and then those things. And I actually, like, when you were talking, let me see if I can find it because I have my notebook in front of me. When I talked about like the whole 6 months back, 6 months forward, I actually
Mm-hmm.
just through, this is why journaling is important, okay?
Yeah.
Because you get to go back and, you, like you said, you have that snapshot of like who you were, who you're not, who you want to be, like how you're feeling, et cetera, and you can kind of like dream your way through it. But so I looked at this journal I had wrote in November, and the first things I wrote were, who am I? Who do I want to be?
Mm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't usually read my journals out loud, but I was like, oh, this
Oh,
might sound cool. I
yes.
was like, this is different because, like, this question, I really wrote this. I was like, this question has been haunting me recently, asking me, challenging me to come to the edge and discover. And I continued on. And then this week, the other day, because I was going through, like, I try to keep a weekly journal habit. It's not always consistent, but like I at least write something down, right? Um and 6 months later I wrote, and I was like, in red pen, all caps, I was like, I know who I am, whose I am, and who I am to be. And then
Mm-hmm.
I have this like paragraph, and I can share it here now, or I can always share it later. But I started with like, and I am an empathetic and servant leader, a listener and a speaker, a storyteller. I am kind and I am a justice seeker. I'm a builder of people, of community and culture. I'm a mental health advocate, a professional with the gift of healing. I am a creator of many dreams. And then I was like, I am a sister, a daughter, a cousin, a godmother, a future mother, a woman and a divine soul. I am God's child, destined as a bridge builder, a light illuminator. I am to be a testimony of all odds being defined, a generational curse breaker, a legacy maker. I am the uprooted, and I came to find my way home.
Mm.
So
Wow. That's beautiful.
thank you.
Whew. Uprooter. Mm-hmm.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Hanna. Just interrupting you for just a little moment to remind you, if you have not, go check out the website uprootednetwork.com. Whether you're new here or you've been following for a long time, you know that this is a space for those of us who have been having to navigate life very completely differently than the cultures we might be a part of. So whether that means you're an immigrant, maybe you're the first generation to change the narrative, maybe you're an entrepreneur, you're a dream chaser in some type of way, and you're believing for a better life. So obviously Uprooted Network resonated with you, and we have been scaling out services, trying to build this into a bigger community for you all. And also, I'm launching all types of management consulting services and personal and professional group coaching this summer. I really have a big heart for those of you who are students, those of you who maybe haven't had an opportunity to get this type of development before. I'm going to be offering it at a very reasonable price because, you know what, I want to knock down those obstacles and barriers. I try to do it the way that everybody else does, and it wasn't working. So we're going to do it the uprooted way. I want y'all to make sure, go check out the website, uprootednetwork.com, and now you can go back to your episode. I was like, it feels good. That 6 months of working on yourself, it will take you some places. It will definitely take you some places. So that was my and I didn't even do it in preparation for this too. So it was just like, I also am like, oh, okay, I see you, God. Like, that's my faith base, you know. I was like, okay, I see what you're doing. I see how you line me up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is good.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for me to get to the point where I could write that, because I wrote that very quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't take me too long to write that down, but it took me that long to get to the point where I could write that down and like
Mm-hmm.
feel confident in who that was. But it was because I went through the struggles of figuring out who I am. I went through the like, let me try this. I moved here. I tried different friendships. I tried different jobs. Like, I've tried different roles within the community, within my family. And then I was like, yeah, I don't like this stuff. What do I like? Like, who is it that I am? And like, how do I show up there? And that is, sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow, because sometimes you have to
Mm-hmm.
recognize the parts of yourself that you don't like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, ooh,
Yeah.
like, how
Gotta
is that?
integrate it. I know, that's
Yeah.
the part where it's like you gotta like, "Ooh, okay." Like, how do you make that part a friend, right? How do you make the parts where you can cringe or like you're like, "Ooh, that part, okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for like showing me that." And also, welcome, like, come on in. Like I've heard people say like use metaphors like that to describe, no, like let's not close the door on these aspects of ourselves, but it's like how do you open the door wide open so that you can
Yeah.
really start integrating it, because at the end of that, right, like at the end of sort of that frustration or that squirminess that we might
Mhm.
have towards parts of ourselves, there's a need there, or there's
Mhm.
something there, there's a wisdom there that wants to be seen, wants to be integrated, and how do we like shine a light onto it in a way that allows for what wants to come through. And that takes a lot of awareness, a lot of presence, all of that. So
Mhm.
thanks for sharing that. I think that is like super important. It's like just that's it.
Yeah. I was like, "Oh, feel pretty good about this one." No, it
Mm.
is, it is that, all of that, and, I wonder for you, I didn't ask you to have something planned, but I wonder for you in this, like, in your process and in what we were just sharing, were there were you sup I guess, were you surprised by the things that you didn't realize about yourself that you needed to shed? Um, and then how, like, were you able to go through that process? Because 'Cause we're saying it's a difficult process, but I'm, like, wondering what that actually looked like for you. Did you have support? Did you kinda have to cry it out on your own? Because I feel like everyone processes differently, so I was, like, wondering what that felt like for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it's a mix of like definitely having tools and having support systems, a mix of like having the space to yourself to for, like therapy, having someone to talk to, creating a space where you can talk to a trained professional in
Mhm.
matters of the heart, right? Like that's really important, like that
Mhm.
emotional space. And sometimes, yeah, we again, like I said earlier, we do need to sort of see ourselves mirrored in a way that requires some help, and that's okay. So I definitely, like therapy, therapist, reading, like I do, I love poetry, I love fiction. I think there's a lot of wisdom that comes through our authors and
Mhm.
literature and like the people who can distill like these beautiful wisdoms and like universal truths into these really beautiful prose. I'm like, whoa, I need to like read that story or I need to read these poems. And oftentimes that for me has always been like super lifting. Music, I love music, that sonic sort of I don't know, flow. There's some, like we dance, we like feel into
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah,
The instruments that come from Tigray, right? Like, what does it mean to like listen to your music and listen to music that moves something inside of you and like how do you let yourself be moved by it? Um,
mhm,
Friendships, like deepening in friendships, deepening in again like sharing of myself and having others share of themselves and like really leaning into that human experience.
yeah,
Um, and then, yeah, just like, again, like really trying to create the space for sort of like me to be able to collaborate with myself too in different ways, whether it's through exercise, like literally, it's like just how do you like move your body, like move this blood flow in a way that, again, like allows for more to come through you, things to like shift and like
yeah,
move. I find that like when I'm not moving my body or I'm not exercising or I'm not, getting something in, I
mhm,
it just feels a little bit harder those days, right? And I'm sure
yeah,
there's some science around it, right? But I think it's things like that. But I think again, like that takes a lot of time to be able to navigate. And I have
mhm,
had a lot of moments where it's and still, right, where you're just kind of like, I just need to take a day and being okay with that, right? It's like also being okay with not knowing exactly what is going on and like not like just letting an emotion be an emotion and not for me like I've really
right,
had to learn not to create a narrative around it. So for example,
mhm.
like if I'm sad, I'll start thinking about all the reasons why I could be sad and it could be like
Oh,
like so many different things. And then I remember one day I was doing that. I was just like, I'm sad. And I told myself that. I was like, I'm
yeah,
sad. And then I started thinking about all the reasons why I could be sad. And I remember I just like stopped. I was like,
yeah,
no, I don't have to create a narrative out of it. Just feel the emotion fully, let it do
mhm,
its thing, let it take on its complete form, let it complete that, span
yeah,
of its life, right? Just let it happen. Um, but those are the things that I find for me have helped, but also it's because there have been a lot of times where I have not been able to like see that, right? Or a lot of times where I was just like, man, you know, these narratives that weren't helpful, right? I had to
mhm,
overcome them. And I know I had to do that because it was I kept doing it, right? And I had to sort of get myself out of it. Again, kind of like what I was saying, like through those different tools, through journaling, through therapy, through music, through um, reading, the list goes on, right? So
Yeah.
I think for me, those are the things that have been helpful. And, hindsight is always 2020, right? Like, but also I wouldn't be able to do these things now or have this wisdom if it wasn't for those experiences. So it's kind of like it's not linear, right? It's all cyclical.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, I have to go back to those moments where, there were moments where, man, I remember a time where I wasn't feeling my best, or like, this is the thing that happened. I remember how I felt. How do I kind of go back to that moment, like mentally, and just kind of like timeline jump or something and just be like, okay, what did I need? How can I give myself what I need at that moment and kind of like rewrite the story?
Yeah.
Um, so it's stuff like that I feel like we also have access to a lot more information now, which is incredible, right? Like that is incredible to be in a time like this now, but it's also, of course, you have to do your due diligence. You have to, take precaution, of course. I think, yeah, there are so many resources out there. I'm a big believer in tools. I'm a big believer of supports and resources. I'm a big believer of asking for help when I need it,
Mm,
and allowing to, myself to be witnessed for sure. Like that for me is really important to me now. And also, I know that it is like very culturally different than how a
yeah.
lot of us have grown up. And that is like the fundamental, like, I don't know, it's like that dissonance, right? That happens where it's like, that's what it's like to be this first, second generation um, person, right? Where your parents have a different experience and then you have a different experience. And how do you
Mhm.
navigate and negotiate that, right? Like there's so many negotiations that have to happen along the way. Um,
Mhm.
but there are also so many people who are also doing this with you at the same time. So that's what I love what you're doing, Hanna, for real, because like these are the spaces where we can talk about that and we can share and we can say, yo, like this doesn't have to be an isolating experience. I've
Yeah.
experienced that too. Or, whoa, your experience this thing that I'm just starting to experience. Like, how did you work through that? Right? Like, we need each
Mhm.
other. And so that's why, this space that you create across many different platforms is really important because I wish I had something like this, right? For sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to like continue sharing, but I think those are the things that, whew, I'm just like,
Yeah,
whoa, that's like, that's, you got a whole like list,
of
and like
things, yeah.
inventory. You got a whole inventory of like, what can I pull out to support? And yeah, in a healing journey or a journey of like being a self, a journey of being a person, a being.
Yeah, and I always thank you for that because I feel like I did what you did, right? Like, I was I tell people I have glasses for a reason, okay? I was in the books. Like, I was in the books. I was, like, very close to a screen all the time. Like, I was always trying to soak in as much as I could, and I, grasped, like, very heavily into that. Like, I was like, "What? The pic," because I had an awareness at a very young age, and I feel like most of us who are the oldest in an immigrant family, like, had this added, like, responsibility and, like, level of awareness with our parents of, like, "You really don't know what's going on here." Like, you don't get it, and I would go and look for those answers elsewhere, and I kinda grasped onto this concept that, like, I can figure it out, I can learn it, and, I remember, like, Oprah and tons of people always saying, like, "Knowledge is power," and I was like, "Alright, let me go learn as much as I can and be, like, the most powerful person ever." And it was just like this idea that like I could like learn my way through anything and that kind of stuck. But it what I get like where it highlighted for me and what you were sharing, and this is I think the part that a lot of us struggle with because I remember my therapist like paused and it like made me like stop too, is like what you were saying like about like the example of letting you yourself feel the emotion of whatever it is. Because when you're using some of those tools, when you're reading, when you're reflecting or whatever, like, we will start to intellectualize it, right? Like, you're like, "Oh, I'm sad. Why?" Right? And then you're trying to, like, intellectualize it, and you're up here in your brain, and you kept saying things like, "Remember your body." Like, there's actually I posted this clip too, on my story today, but, like, your emotions are attached to your nervous system, right? Like they're not separate. Like your emotions and your feelings are not separate from your body. They are within your body. And there's things that your body needs to release. That's why I really push the crying. I'm like, listen, it's not all bad. Like your body literally needs to release. We're not meant to hold everything. Like we're not. And like you can intellectualize it later, but like cry it out now. And most of the time you're not gonna cry for that long. Like you're gonna cry, like your body can't physically cry for that long. You'll run out of tears eventually. And so you usually only really need a minute or two to get like that big rush of it out. But after that, it's not as strenuous as people think, but it is that thing of like it's in your body and you need to connect to your body so that you can actually release it and like let it process through and not try to intellectualize it and explain it away. Cause I would always try to explain it away or like, kind of like justify. And it's like, who am I trying to justify this to? I'm sad, I'm
Mhm.
sad. I don't gotta explain
Yeah.
that to you. Right? Like and
Nope.
I was like, where did that learned behavior come
No.
from?
I
Like
know.
it's hard
And
though.
it's hard, yeah. And it's also really beautiful because at the same time, like you are also modeling that for others, right? You're
Mhm.
modeling that for your parents, for example. And like what does it mean to be in a space like that where it's like, the roles are kind of shifting too, like in this beautiful way where um there's this recognition that that our parents did the best that they could for us, right, in many different kinds of ways, right? And so how do you honor that and also honor where you are too at the same time? Like how do you release any sort of judgment or shame that I think many of us and many folks like build up over time? I think that's just kind of like the nature of sort of like these kinds of relationship dynamics within families sometimes. But like how do you see everyone, like your whole entire, if you are a human and like a being, like so are other folks, right, who
Yeah.
have had to be in these new spaces. And like, yeah, like how is your own sort of uh like space where you're doing these things influencing like other people in your life? And it's really cool because you could see it, I don't know, your siblings, your parents, your friends. You're just like, whoa, wow,
Yeah.
this is cool. Like, I like
Yeah.
it. It's, we're all connected. So
I love it. I love it. It reminds me of that Marianne Williamson quote of like,
mm,
what is our biggest fear? And it's like, our biggest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our biggest fear is like, oh, I always say it wrong, but like paraphrasing is like that
hmm
we're afraid to shine our light, like unknowingly thinking, you know what I mean? Like thinking somehow that it was like going to be bad, but really when we
hmm
illuminate ourselves and share ourselves, we allow others to also share their light. And so that's pretty much the
yeah.
walk I've been walking. Before I did it publicly, like on a recorded podcast, right? It was like very much I was this way before the cameras were on. And so it was an adjustment to being like, oh, like there was old triggers that came up for me of like feeling the need to like show up properly or like what does that even mean? And like yeah, it had to like unlearn and cry through that again because this was like another level of that. But to see it play out throughout my friendships, throughout like all my relationships. And honestly, I don't even operate in relationship with people if I can't be this way. I'm like, acquaintance, like you are like a person on the street that I will like respect, but like I'm not in relation with you if I can't be myself. Like if I can't show up this way, if I can't be authentically me, then like we don't have a relationship. And I've just been way more vocal about that. Like and really like the deeper you get into this, the more you start to really root yourself and like what identity means to you. um it becomes very clear who doesn't belong in that circle or like spaces that you don't want to occupy. You're like, hey, I can't do that no more. I can't bend that way anymore. And there was something you put in there too, or that you put in there that you were saying in there that I had bookmarked in my mind of uh the friendships, right? Like going deeper into your friendships and wondering for you, because I know that I've experienced the roller coaster of emotions when it comes to that because as you're doing this self exploration, and honestly, within that, you really are healing yourself in many ways. That changes, like what you're talking about, right? Like that changes your
Mhm,
relationship. And yes, it can change for the positive, but sometimes like your
mhm,
healing and your exploration and like your getting more confident in your identity actually takes you away from the identity that other people had you in, or
mm,
like that relationship dynamic changes. So I wanted to see,
mhm,
like, for you, how did that kind of play out, or is it even playing out, right? Because like it could have just been
mm,
all positive, which I'm like, yes,
mhm,
good, great, but
mhm.
like I do know that that's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that I feel very fortunate to have people in my life who, where, we support one another in a way that we want each of us to be more of ourselves.
Mhm,
But I do know that with that can come a sense of distance because of just kind of being at different places with
mhm,
um, life or like experiences, right? And I think that's more of just kind of like, um, I don't know, it just feels like there are some things that feel more drawn to sometimes, and then other things that kind of feel like there's just some more space and distance created. And I think both those things are, again, to me, like on this end, I'm like, wow, that's beautiful, right? It's like, wow, like we can continue to like keep becoming more of ourselves, right? And keep being sort of drawn to these aspects that like support our life's journey and our life's work. And so yeah, I feel very fortunate to have beautiful people in my life who we support each other in those ways. And I actually find that when you become more of yourself, you have like more beautiful people. Like you have more people who come into your life in a
mhm,
way that is really beautiful, right? So it's just like it just becomes this expansive space where I think that the more you are you, the more you see you in others too. And even if it's like, okay, maybe this might not be a friend, or maybe this not might not be someone that I'll see like a deep, close connection with, like at all times, but you can, it
mhm.
sort of like humanizes all of it too, where you kind of see yourself in everyone.
Yeah,
And in some cases, right? Like you see a part of you in others, whether or not, you're going to be in community with them, like intimately, in different ways, like that,
mhm,
yes or no, whatever. But even if there is distance, I think sort of like going through the sort of process or like being in this sort of like experience, allows for more grace, I would say, to others and, towards yourself, hopefully. And that's the other thing, right? It's like, how do you have self compassion in all of this? It's like, oh gosh, okay, I messed up, or ah,
mhm.
man, I did that thing, or I said that thing, and that wasn't, dang, I feel this or I feel that. And how do you integrate that too, right? Like integrate whatever shame or judgment you might put on yourself, but turn that into self compassion. I think that's also where a lot of the work happens. And I think the more self compassion you have, the more you'll see everyone else around you is like literally you, but like very different, but also the same. So you'll start to see yourself in others. At least that's what my experience has been. So I feel really happy and grateful to be in spaces where I can feel love and I can give and receive love in really beautiful ways. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm telling you, it makes a ton of difference. Like it kind of goes back to where we started in this conversation of like the steps that you're taking to self-explore, and like, seeing yourself in the people that you're spending time with, right? You're seeing yourself in your friendships, in different types of relationships. And I guess like to put a bow on it, right? It's like you're going to attract who you believe you are, like not just who you are, right? I'm saying it very specifically because who you actually are and who you like is determined by who you believe you are. So if you believe that you're only this thing, like that's how you're going to show up, right? And so like you're going to be attracted to that. The music that you choose to listen to, the books you choose to read or not read, right? Because that could be a thing. um the friendships that you try to attain, right? Like the job you want, like all of these things are really like you're going to attract that because you feel that way internally. Like that's how you learn about yourself, like, oh yeah, I'm into that, like that's who I am. And I tell people, I'm like, okay, a lot of life is just projection. A lot of like relationship is just a mirror. Like relationships really are like offering you a mirror. That's why when you get into intimate relationships and you don't do your work, it can be harder if you haven't like started that practice, because your partner is going to mirror to you who you are. Like the things you don't like about you usually are in somebody else too, right? Like that's how that works. And so I always kind of tell people, like, you want this healing process to be easier, like start moving towards that direction. Like there's people who are operating in the way you want to be. You might not be there yet. Like start moving in that direction. Start feeling your energy there, because that's who you're going to start to become. That's like the whole like premise of this, is like uprooting those things out of yourself. Like, and
Mhm.
before you can uproot it, you have to see it and you have to
Yeah.
like be aware of it. And people are like, how do you become self-aware? And I was like, well, if you understand this principle, that projection, right? Like you, most of the time, you are projecting onto others. Like when you're speaking to others, when you're in relationship with other people, if you can understand that that's a mirrored relationship, it also forces you to have the self-compassion and the grace and like all of those things, if you allow yourself to be open to it. Because you're like, for me, right, like the examples that I would give, like even now today, right? I'm like looking at someone, I'm like, I don't like that. Like, was like things just like irritate me right away. And then my
Yeah.
second thought is like, do I do that? Like
Yeah.
that's like my
Right.
second thought. It's like, why does that irritate you so much? It's like, oh, because you do it too, right? So like I've always had to, because I understand that principle, I constantly check myself and I like tell people that's an invitation. Like that moment or whatever it is, like you were triggered or like whatever it, like that was your invitation to like dive deeper, to maybe reflect a little bit, to see something in you, because like
Mhm.
you're there, right? And like that is really what you're experiencing. That's how you're going to start showing up in the world. People like to call it law of attraction. There's like all different ways to you can understand that concept, but that's really at the
Mhm.
core of what it's going to be. So if you want to change, then you start there. Start looking at your environment and take inventory. If you're complaining about it, you don't like things or whatever, it's like, well, what don't you like about it? Like be
Mhm.
specific, and then start thinking about like, well, what would you want to replace that with? Or
Mhm.
and then how do you get there, right? And that's why like I love books, because you might not be able to afford hopping on a flight and going on a retreat to be by yourself. You might not be able to afford to move out. And like I've had this question before of like, you know, if you don't have those friendships, like, right, like you don't have that support, and it's like, but you can do that in your mind. You can do that with books, you can do that with movies, you can do that with meditation, you can do that with journaling, right? Like you can try and like look for other things, but like you got to start with that self-awareness piece. You got to start with like taking inventory of like what isn't working, how you're already showing up, who you're becoming in the current circumstance, and like if you're cool with that, keep going. Right? Like that's
Mhm.
great,
Yeah.
right? Just get better at it. And if you're not, that's like an invitation for you to, change it up. So thank you for that. And because we are at our time and we did great. So I hope people are taking these gems, because I definitely was like, yes, this is the conversations that I was having in college as I started like my healing journey. And so I was like, it's
Mhm.
really like, it's cool for me to have it now and be like, wow, we sound so much smarter like when we were younger.
Aw,
Yeah, like, wow, we're really doing it. Good job.
I know. We're the same people. I'm the same person, but
All the time.
with
It's so
more
nice.
experiences.
Yes,
I know,
it's
now
like
now we just have more things to draw from, but I think
exactly.
we the same people.
Yes. I told you, I'm like, yeah, and it's a compliment. Like I got to kick it with my sisters, my sorority sisters that I haven't seen in some years, and they're like, "You're the same." I'm like, "Ah, thanks." Like it's like
Love it.
it's a compliment. Like you're like my personality and and like I've just elevated, and it's been really really
Mhm.
nice. And so I'm like,
Mm.
yes, you kind of need those bookmarks, because there's people like for me, my best friend, we've been best friends for like 15 years now,
Mhm.
since high school, and so it's always very easy for me to like when we're together, like it's easy for us to like be like, oh my god, we've grown so much because you've known me since I was like at the very
Mhm.
beginning stages before I even understood what I was doing.
Yeah.
And to see me now and to see the dream like tangible coming into fruition, it's just this like really phenomenal thing. And I want to leave on that because that's where I always like want people to start thinking about is like your legacy, right? Like what are you building? Right? Like who are you trying to be? So I want to ask you in our closing, what are the things I guess you want to reroot yourself in, if there are?
Mhm.
Like what seeds are you planting for yourself, and like what seeds do you want to leave behind?
Mhm. That's a really beautiful question. Ah, wow. I think the first thing that comes to mind, and really the only thing, is like, how do I get to fully express this like life that I'm in, right? This body that I'm in, this person that I am, right? Like, what does it mean to be me
Mhm,
alongside my community, right? Like, what does it mean to really root yourself in a community in a way that everyone can have the space to be able to explore themselves fully? That to me is like what it comes down to. It's like community and expression and living a life that you can feel like yourself. And that sounds really easy, but like literally this whole conversation is about how hard it feels
mhm,
to be yourself sometimes, right? And again, like I do want to insert that we have all of these interlocking systems that influence and impact the way that we navigate the world, the way that we navigate systems, right? All of these systems of oppression, all of these
mhm,
systems of like what it means to be you here, there, anywhere, right? And so like what does
mhm,
it mean? So I think about like rooting myself, I think about like how can I call on my like the traditions in which I come from, right? And how do I let that strength guide me alongside a beautiful community of people who are also sort of navigating that together. And that's what I want to be doing because I think that so many other things are going to be happening. Like there are going to be all these experiences, there are going to be all these things that you have to navigate. But as long as you kind of like have a strong core, um,
mhm,
that's what I want, right? Like I want to be able to, support others through as they navigate being themselves or are themselves and to live fully and deeply into that. And that is a life's work, right? That is like the work of our lives is being ourselves in so many different ways. Um,
mhm.
so that's what I continue to root in because that can take on many shapes and forms, and that's what I continue to help gives me courage. It helps me feel brave, it helps me speak up, it helps me like really understand what I believe in, right? Understand like what issues am I voting on, like who are the people that I'm drawn to and things like that in terms of like any sort of anything. So for me, like those things again go back into like how do I navigate this world politically? How do I navigate it socially, emotionally, spiritually? All of those things matter, and that's kind of like the lens in which everything else happens for sure.
Oh, I love that. I love that. This is my favorite part. I was like, I love like affirming for people. Like, I realized that's just it very quickly became like my favorite part of the show. And for me, I was like getting chills as you spoke. And I don't know if this resonates for you in any way, but I like saw you as an author, and I don't know if that's on your vision board. But I was like, I see that as like one of the forms of expression for you in terms of like doing that. Because for one, let me start with you're already doing it because you coming on the show is just like one step, like one part of it. But the fact that you live this way, and I can say this because like I feel like this is how our conversations usually go. It's like I feel like you are that way in like all the settings that I see you in, and it gives people permission to also be that way, right?
Mm,
And like to also like go and explore and like hey, like you're just authentically you. I don't see you're like trying to bend or like, become something else whenever like we've been in shared spaces. And so I think that like not I think I know that you're already like fulfilling that, and I just see it getting bigger. And I was like, oh, she sounds like Bell Hooks. Like I felt like this would be like a Bell Hooks book to me, of like a further kind of extension on that type of work. You know, I feel like Bell Hooks had that lifelong work as well too, of like really trying to understand life and give us like language and advice and exploration of it all. And I was like, oh, I could totally see that for you. I could like, I was like, oh, she's gonna kill it. Like that's literally, I was just like, oh, she's gonna be
Oh,
like, that's gonna be so dope. I don't know when it's gonna happen, how it's gonna happen. I just see that like you occupying that space, and I want to plant that seed as well. I mean, if you don't want it, you don't got to take it. But I'm like, I see it for you, sis, because I see such like a brightness, right? And like you have the right heart center. You know what I mean? Like you have a true intention for it, and I love to see that seed get watered and like what
hmm.
tree comes out of that, because that's a beautiful tree. I love that. And I love
Wow.
that for you. Yeah.
Oh man, thank you. I
Yeah.
feel so grateful for your beautiful words. I feel so affirmed, and like what a beautiful sharing. Like thank you for saying that in me.
Yeah.
I see very similar things in you too, right? Like the spaces that you create. And oh my gosh, to be in the same sentence as a bell hooks, for example, is like, oh my God, so humbling. So
Yes.
shout out to all of the ancestors who certainly like create space, right, to explore. I certainly
Yeah.
draw on bell hooks, I draw on Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, like so many of these Black women writers, right, who do this phenomenal like self exploration, have been doing it. Like that is the tradition that I've always been
Mhm.
drawn to. So very humbling and also
Yeah.
very affirming. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hanna.
Yes. Of
Appreciate
course.
you.
Yes. Listen, we gotta have, every generation needs it. You know what I mean? Like the gifts have to keep coming, and they have to keep remanifesting. And so you see it in you, girl, like you go after it, because I definitely can, I could see the book coming. So I'm like, oh, can't wait.
Okay, look,
Can't wait to have you back on to like promote that. It's supposed to be really
now
cool.
it's like, well, if you see it in me, it's because you see it in yourself, right? I am your
I'm
mirror,
not mad
you're
at
my
that. Hey, listen,
mirror, you're
I'm not
reflecting
running.
yourself.
I don't know if you see the vision board back there, but there's definitely
Yes,
some books on it. Got some books
yes,
on there. People might want to zoom into it later. Yes, there's some books on there. I'm not running away from that at all. It's like
yes.
I'm getting
Love
there. I'm
that.
making time for it. Because I am a reader, and obviously I have a journal, so there's plenty of content for me to sift
Yeah.
through. So yeah, with that, y'all, this was a phenomenal conversation, especially for anyone who's like on this, trying to get into it, is struggling in the middle, wherever you're at. Like, I always think that like actually getting back to like what are we doing and why are we doing it is super important. And I'm just so thankful that you were able to come on and that we were able to have this conversation. So for those of
Yes.
y'all who are listening, make sure, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's free. I really am so confused by people who don't. I'm like, it's literally free. It don't cost you anything to subscribe. It is the freest way that you can support this work, so that we continue to have these spaces, and then I can make them bigger, and then we can invite more people into it, and we can help more people heal and find themselves. So make sure you are hitting subscribe, get your notifications, like this, and do me a favor, if this blessed you in some way, if you learned something from this, like I don't care what it was, put it in the comments, but then share it with your friends, right? Like we talked about the friendships that are supporting us in this. Like this is all part of the journey. So like share this with your friends, share this with the people that you care about, that you love, that you feel like would actually benefit from this too. And then maybe y'all all have a conversation about this together. Like that is really what I want to see happening. Like I want this to be a starter conversation, and I want y'all to like go out and like do that exploration, like go and do it, and then come back and tell me how it went. So, y'all, that is Uproot Your Thoughts. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Selamawit. This has been such a pleasure, and I'm just so
Yes.
excited.
Thank
And
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome. So, y'all, peace out. Hit that subscribe, hit that like. I will see you soon. Y'all, what's good, Uprooted Fam? I really hope you enjoyed that last episode. And the way that you could let me know, hit that like button. Make sure you hit that like button. Please share, okay? If this blessed you, tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend. And that's how we grow. So, again, like, share, and if you are not subscribed, what are you doing? It's free. It's free, y'all. Subscribe. Also, if you have not picked up your merch, hey now, say now. Go ahead and hit up uprootednetwork.com. Again, that is uprootednetwork.com. Get your merch, get all your podcast links there. And we're going to be rolling out programming pretty soon, and you're going to want to be registered. I'm just telling you, make sure you are following us and make sure that you are tapping in with your girl. Love y'all all so much. Have a blessed day.